Welcome to Block Talks. Today's guest is Brett King.
Hey,
Brett, how you doing?
I'm great, Asbed. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. Brett, you're a Australian-born futurist. You're globally renowned keynote speaker, and you have international best-selling books. You're an author of Augmented, Bank 2.0, Goes to Bank 3.0, Bank 4.0.
Working
I
on
want,
5.0 now.
I know. I
Yeah,
was just about to ask you. I want to know the whole transition and the story about that.
sure.
Let me tell you a little bit more about Brett. Most people they might not know, but Brett is one of the first ones where he started the whole fintech journey. You had Movin.
Yep.
You raised around 40 million, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken, and it was the first mobile banking app in the US and the
It
UK.
was the first mobile banking app where you could order a debit card anywhere in the world. Like
Correct.
in the app, yeah,
We'll
correct.
have to talk more about that as well. You have a number one fintech podcast.
Podcast.
It's called The Breaking Banks. You have another one for the futurist side of
Yep.
things as well,
Number
where you've
one.
already interviewed Elon Musk and Sophia the robot. That's something else we need to talk
Yep.
about. You're named King of Disruptors. I mean, every time I spend time with you, I always learn something phenomenal. So always a journey with you as well. Brett, you just don't, talk about the future, you just see it as well. We know it from your books. We were seeing something yesterday as well in Augmented, where you've already predicted something. You'll tell me more about that as well.
Sure.
I think your book was already seen as well in President Xi's.
Yes, bookshelf during his 2018 national address to the nation.
Exactly.
So that's a cool flex,
That's
right?
a super cool flex, actually. So I would love to know more all about the AI, the
Sure.
whole tokenization, and the transformation. And you have something really cool as well, developing as well as a side project.
Sure.
Would love to know more.
Absolutely. Well, this sort of, I guess this starts with me being a technologist. I started as a coder. I taught myself to code at the age of 13 on a Commodore VIC-20 computer, upgraded to a PC when I was probably 16. Used to, sort of straight out of high school into a coding environment, put myself through university, dropped out of university, then built my own software business for a bunch of years, took that offshore. In 99, moved from Australia to Hong Kong. So I've been offshore for 26 years now. Was in Hong Kong for 6.5 years or so, moved here to Dubai. Was here for 5 years until the financial crisis hit. Took a couple of years off to write my first book. It was published in April 2010, Bank 2.0. And while I was on the book tour for Bank 2.0, I founded Movin.
All right. So that was
So,
like a whole
yeah.
tour for you as well.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
I mean, I think publishing the book and sort of being at that stage, one of the first authors to really crystallize this vision of digital banking and transformation in the banking sector at the time gave me enormous flexibility in terms of profile and raising money for the business and so forth. So it was fortuitous. But I mean, when I was 25, I wrote my first science fiction novel. Never published it, but I was always sort of a bit of a frustrated science fiction writer, and as a technologist, was very interested in emerging tech. But I'd sort of developed this capability at a fairly early stage in my career, or I realized I had a sort of an advantage, which was being able to communicate highly technical concepts in very simple forms to business people. So that sort of was a superpower. I mean, like technologists are not generally known as great communicators.
True.
So that sort of been a defining element in my career. But started with technology architecture. I got heavily involved in the .com side from an e-business infrastructure perspective. But it then just became sort of like I was working on next gen tech, the next 5 years. And then it was 7 years and 10 years out, and then 20 years out in terms of forecasting. So, that's sort of where I sort of developed my skill sets as a futurist in that respect.
Super amazing points. You said something very interesting, which is having the best of both worlds, where as a technologist, you might not have that touch where you can speak to the public and explain as beautifully, and there needs to have that art, and I think you have both, and that makes
Yeah.
you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up speaking in front of audiences. I was doing training programs and stuff at a fairly young age, in the corporate world. The business I had in Dubai back in 2005 was a training company, essentially, and bringing in people from all over the world and sort of doing certified training programs here. So, I've been communicating at that level, but the ability to take highly technical concepts such as like how artificial intelligence is going to impact the world, or how AI is going to change our economic systems and our political systems, an example, which are extremely complicated, complex issues, and also fly against the face of sort of current logic and thinking, and current economic and political views and things like that. Sure. So when you're trying to communicate those sorts of ideas or concepts, just as you might, like, for example, try and talk about AI disrupting the organization, you're going to get a huge amount of resistance. But in 300 years, when we look back at technological change, the number of governments or the number of businesses that have successfully been able to defend the status quo against technological change is zero. Oh, wow. Right? So there is no scenario where you get to keep your beloved system. Correct. Because you like it better, than what's coming, and you want to defend that. The reality is, in historical terms, we've seen very clear evidence that that technology advancement is undeniable and unstoppable once it gets going. And so, right. With something like AI, where when you talk about AI, the biggest problem with AI is that it's not really compatible with capitalism on a long-term basis, because the more AI you put in the system, the less human capital is required. And so therefore you have to find all these new jobs for people because technology's taken the traditional jobs away. And that happens it's going to happen in such a compressed time frame that the displacement of human workers because of technology is going to be immense. So rapid. And so in that environment, when you look at that, then capitalism, which the only mechanism we have for wealth distribution in the capitalist system today, is giving you a job. So if I can't give you a job, or you're unemployable because technology is orders of magnitude cheaper, then what do we do? Well, then that requires us to have something like universal basic income or something like that, as an example. And in a system like the United States, that's socialism, and it's seen as evil. So you have, the recipe for a break in the system. Correct. So that's just one illustration.
And you've already mentioned this in your books as well, right? So sure. All these points are mentioned way earlier as well, and that's what makes you a futurist. What I'm always wondering, what is a futurist? What is your definition of a futurist? For me, the first time I heard futurist, I was like, what is a futurist? So I would love you to say how do you see it?
So, there's a couple of different. The humorous definition I use is being a futurist means never being wrong today.
That's
right?
Today, yes, correct.
But in reality, the primary discipline for a futurist is a field of study we call super forecasting. So it's the ability to do long range forecasts out 20, 30 years, and that requires some working theory of trending analysis, behavioral analysis, group psychology, large scale systems evolution and things like that. So it's a multidisciplinary capability. I think the thing that really defines futurists is sort of twofold. One is that most futurists are living in the future. They're thinking about the future all the time, so that frames their decision making and the way they process information. And most futurists are optimistic about the impact technology and these changes can have on human systems and human longevity and so forth, right? So that's sort of at the core. To be a good futurist, I think you have to have a lot of flexibility in your thinking. You have to be willing to change your mind when presented with new evidence, and you have to be curious. I think they're sort of key elements.
Love it. Talking about this subject, there's something very interesting happening coming in the next 2 months. Mm-hmm. In September 22, in September
yeah.
23. It's called the Futurist
Summit. Yeah, the
Summit.
Future Summit.
So the Futurist Summit is something super exciting, and it's happening for the first time here in the region. It's actually bringing in a number of the top futurists in the world.
Correct.
It's supported by some very big organizations as well. There's a lot of milestones in this. I would love you to tell us more and give us an idea of what is happening over there as well.
Shout out to our strategic partners, MasterCard and so forth on this for this. This is, as you said, it's the first time we've gathered, half of the world's top 50 futurists in Dubai. We have Professor Brian Cox, the astrophysicist from the UK, Commander Scott Kelly, who spent a year on the space station, futurists from the United Nations, from USVC markets, from all over. But half of the top 50 ranked futurists in the world.
That's amazing.
We also have broad government support here and really great support from the business community. So it is day one is really focused on emerging technologies. This includes human longevity, smart infrastructure, those sort of things, AI and quantum technologies. And then day two is really about organizing principles for the planet moving forward. The idea principally being, that technologies going like this right now because of AI and compute power and so forth, that exponential curve, but policy change and adaptation moves much slower. So we're trying to close the gap with that, because the greatest threat to humanity, over the next 20 years or 30 years is not AI taking over the world. The greatest threat is that the speed of technological change is going to significantly disrupt the way society works. And so that's much more damaging and contentious. So preparing for that takes education and agility.
I love that. And the whole regulatory and the licensing aspect of things. And that's where you're trying to bridge the gap as well.
Exactly.
With the governmental involvement as well. And hence it comes in with Dubai and the UAE being involved very highly as well on governmental levels as well. Tell us about that. Tell us, what do we want to achieve with the Futurist Summit?
So I've been working with the Dubai government since late last year. I attended the World Government Summit here in Dubai in 2024 and worked with the Digital Readiness Retreat that they built a couple of months ago. I'm working with both the Prime Minister's office here on sort of reform of public sector and future readiness testing there, and also working with the central bank in the UAE, central bank in Saudi as well, and other players in the region. So that's really more about future strategies, future-proofing organizations and future-proofing government, making them adaptable, and also just educating the leadership so that they understand what's coming next and how quickly it's going to impact their environment, and what are the mitigation strategies and what are the levers in that, and what are the technologies emerging that we need to support. So it's a pretty interesting area.
Love it. So as TheBlock being a partner as well in the Futurist Summit,
Absolutely,
and also as well with all the central banks, Brett has advised over 25 central banks worldwide. So where and how do you see, with the current Dubai as well, with the Dubai Central Bank, with the Innovation Hub as well that they have over there, they're doing amazing stuff. Where do you see the UAE going and Abu Dhabi being positioned as the capital of capital as well? And how do you see everything evolving around that?
Well, we are at an inflection point in terms of finance and banking. So you asked about the books,
correct,
right? 2.0, 3.0,
and the whole
4.0,
journey. I love it.
And 5.0 is coming next year. And my last book, Bank 4, actually, I just checked today on Amazon. In Amazon US, is still number 2 on the top 10 banking books in the US today on Amazon.
Wow.
After 6 years, right? So that's extraordinary. Bank 4.0.
Bank 4.0,
right,
okay.
Yeah. And the subtitle for Bank 4.0 is Banking Everywhere, Never at a Bank, right? So that's what we have now with wallets. Correct. And digital currencies and so forth. But Bank 5.0 is that essentially banking won't be done by banks anymore. Banking will only be done by technology platforms, because all of the competencies that we had in the old world of banking, none of them really translate. Even the products that we have had historically in banking, So let's take a credit card as an example. We won't have credit cards in 30 years, right? Because if you need access to credit, it'll just be delivered through your AI agent in real time, right? Through your personal AI. And so, you won't need a physical card. You won't need a productized card, and you won't use airline miles and reward programs like we do today. It'll be very different.
Tell
So
us more. Like, I mean, dive a little bit deeper because, I mean, for me, it was very new as well. Recently, I've been diving a little bit more. Like, how would you put that? Like, I mean, for the average Joe, for them to understand, because a lot of the things that you're saying, the old me, I would have like been like, what is he talking about?
So I think about the trend that has been happening with commerce and so forth in general is that compute power has gone like this,
Exponential, correct?
and as that compute power has gone like that, the usability of computers have gone from extremely highly technical requirements for usage down to, a 2-year-old can pick up an iPad and use it with competency, right? So, we're in a very different world where as computing gets more powerful, it's going to be sort of embedded in our world seamlessly. And AI is sort of the next step of that. So you don't even need a keyboard anymore or a screen. You can just talk to your compute stack and it'll solve problems for you. So you'll be able to talk to your personal AI in your ear or have smart glasses with a head-up display and these sorts of technologies. This is very close to being achievable now. In that world, what we're doing is we take all of the complexity out of the current system. So application forms are disappearing. Some of them are online, but if we can eliminate data entry, for example, and just use your digital identity instead of asking you to put your name, date of birth, address, and so forth in a form, that makes it simpler. So if you extrapolate that and you inject artificial intelligence into that, essentially what happens with money and banking is that that core banking utility, the ability to store money safely, the ability to safely move money, send money to different places and pay for stuff, and the ability to access credit, that now becomes a technological domain. So that core piece of utility is now delivered through a technology layer when and where you need it. In the past, you had to go to a physical bank to get that utility. And they would make you fill out these forms, and they framed the way that utility was delivered in terms of products like credit cards and mortgages and so forth. But imagine in the future, you're in Dubai and you're looking to buy an apartment. And I walk into downtown Dubai or Marina or something, and I'm looking at a listed real estate property. And as I walk into that listed real estate property on my smart glasses, or if you're still using your smartphone in a few years, you'll get a notification saying, this is how much credit you have available for home finance or a home purchase, right? In real time, giving you the solution to how you would finance this home if you're interested in buying it. Or you could tokenize the real estate property and rent it out or whatever the case may be. All of that is going to be available to you in real time. You will never have to sign a piece of paper. You'll never have to go into a bank branch ever again. That core utility of the bank will just be available. And as we deliver that utility in real time, we have to strip away the branch-based wrappers that we created for the old system and just deliver that utility in the most efficient manner possible.
Very interesting because DLD, which is the Dubai Land Department, is leading the way as well with the whole tokenization. And actually, just around a month back, they did the first tokenized apartment. It was actually even gone out for less than the actual price as well as a first trial. And this is actually in collaboration with VARA as well, which is the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. So there's a lot going on that aspect.
Yeah, China has done some tokenization on real estate as well, land records and property purchase records on the blockchain in China now.
Tell us about that.
So, well, I think, I think this really falls into the whole digital twin sort of machine readable infrastructure you need. If you're going to have AIs managing in real time these types of capabilities, or your agentic AI as we call it, your AI agent going out and being able to do these things, it has to understand that world from a machine perspective. So everything needs to be machine readable. So property becomes tokenized. Your health is tokenized.
I was going to ask you what is machine readable, but
So, essentially, if I wanted to use an AI, for example, to manage your health and optimize your chances of a long, healthy life, longevity treatments, then all of the data that comes into that decision making needs to be as real time as possible. So your genome isn't going to change unless you're using gene therapy or, subjected to extreme environmental concerns. Your genome's fairly static, but your blood work, we need to get that regularly. We need to check your heart rate. We're wearing these sensors now, heart rate sensors and blood pressure sensors and, and so forth like that. We need to get as much of that data in real time so we can do accurate diagnostics and therefore, mitigation strategies. And the same is true for supply chain automation and things like that. If we have trucks delivering products from a robotic factory and then autonomous trucks delivering them to an autonomous shipping port to ship out to destinations, all of that infrastructure from the roads, the autonomous trucks driving on the roads, the autonomous factory with the robots inside the factory, the warehousing capabilities, all of that needs to be machine readable. So machines need to understand that. And while some image recognition and cameras in some environments will do that partially, the reality is we need sort of a digital representation of the world so AI can operate in that. And we call that today a digital twin concept. So a digital version of you or the world or a city in somewhere on the compute stack, so machines can understand how to navigate the world in real time.
So the question asks itself, where do you see the future of ownership?
This is an interesting one. The reality is the more and more AI you put into our system, the less money will become valuable. And I'll explain that. Let's say by 2050 or 2060, which is about the time frame, that in advanced economies like China and UAE, South Korea, half of the economy will be automated, right? So half of the stuff that is economic activity, 2050 to 2060, right? So you're going to have half of the trucks on the road are autonomous, not driven by humans, maybe more. All of the shipping ports will be automated. The most successful factories and the most successful manufacturers will be using autonomous factories, so no humans on the factory floor. The only economy that's really doing that today is China. They have the most dark factories of anyone. The US has one half dark factory, which is the Gigafactory in Texas, but there's still a lot of humans in the factory floor. But all of the EVs that are being produced in China now, most of them are in dark factories. Every smartphone from Xiaomi and Huawei are dark factories. So dark factories means there's not a single human on the factory floor. So they can turn out the lights.
Correct.
The only time they turn the lights on is when someone comes in to clean, and they don't have to clean as often because there's no humans around. So that's an illustration. So that's the type of infrastructure that we need to run this, but none of that runs on fiat banking systems. It doesn't run on fiat currency. It doesn't run on core banking systems. It has to be next generation tokenized infrastructure. So the more autonomy you put in the system, the more autonomous infrastructure from a financial and governance and regulation perspective is required. So if you get to that tipping point where half of your GDP is autonomous infrastructure, essentially you've just got money in and money out of that interface. The rest of that system runs essentially tokenized. So tokens become at that point the primary mechanism, but the way we think about it today is that each token has a monetary value.
Correct.
That won't persist beyond, say, the 2050s or 2060s because it will become about energy or time or other metrics that are internal to the system. And AI will just continue to optimize around that, optimize value exchange, beyond our system of value exchange using currency. And so they'll find much more efficient mechanisms of value exchange than money, you know, and at that point, essentially, the value of money in the system declines to the point where I'd say by 2100s, money won't exist.
All right. Those are stuff we've been talking about for the last 10 years as well, but then, now it's getting a little bit more advanced.
You can see the path, right?
100%. And Brett, with a world where it's tokenized everything, this is where we're going. From real estate to reputation, where do you see we're gonna be having and owning less in the future?
So, people refer to the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset. You're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy. I'd frame it a slightly different way, so it's less conspiracy theorist contentious. Is that how do we measure the success of an economy today, right? We measure the success of an economy by GDP growth, right? That's the primary metric. We can use trade balances and surplus. We can use unemployment levels. There's various elements that we can use, but the primary measure we use today is GDP growth. GDP growth will become unfashionable in the future, primarily because of climate distress and climate mitigation, that going for growth in the midst of climate chaos will be seen as counterproductive for the species. We were talking about this offline beforehand. In the network of futurists we run globally, there's not a single futurist that's a climate denier. Because to be a good futurist, you have to deal with probabilities in terms of impact on society, and climate needs to be assessed in those models. So you put all of that together, and what do successful economies look like in the 2050s? Well, and this is sort of, it would appear to be controversial today, but the most successful economies give the best quality of life to their citizens. This is the argument for the future. Correct. So in the future, these economies will have to be sustainable. And for example, air quality will need to be better because 10 million people die every year from poor air quality, pollution basically. Healthcare will need to be broadly free, and particularly longevity treatments will need to be widely accessible because that's going to be a sign of a successful economy. And so essentially in the 2050s and 2060s, the economy provides all of this infrastructure for citizens to live their best life, and that will be the way economies compete for talent and so forth. And keep in mind also we'll be working a lot less in terms of the way we think about it today. If I ask you in 2040, what do you do, Asbed? Your answer will not be what puts food on the table, because a successful economy will be able to provide food, healthcare, education, and housing for citizens, at a very high quality level without you having to pay for those things, right? You'll get that by the right of citizenship or by right of residency. Where the money will matter in the future is experiences and continued consumption. But again, consumption is going to be seen as something that has to be balanced against the goals of the broader health of the community. So it's you have to put your mindset in a different sort of psychology for the future.
The amount of futuristic ideas that are out there as well, and where you're tapping as well with longevity and everything that goes as well in the future. Where do you see longevity leading to? I think nowadays with the current where we are, and even in the UAE, a lot of new longevity clinics are opening up.
Sure.
There's a lot of new treatments. There's a lot of biohacking going on. Where do you see the future of health and everything related towards this aspect of things?
So today when we look at the world in most of the G20, with the exception of one economy, the United States, where life expectancy is declining right now, mainly because of the affordability of healthcare. But the rest of the G20, your life expectancy is now 80, right?
Correct.
But someone who's 25 today, their life expectancy will be, average of 100 by the time they age. It could be significantly better than that. So let's say it's 130. Let's say by the 2050s or 2060s, we're on longevity escape velocity, and now we can guarantee people are going to live to 120 or 130. Well, how does that change the way you approach your life? You can't retire at age 60 because your money's going to run out before you get to 120. And if you're going to live to 120, then, well, why would you stop going to school at 25? You know, why might you not stay educated, being educated, or learning skills, until you're in your mid 30s, or
even the skills are all going to
lifelong.
change,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because I mean, with the
exactly.
whole AI coming in, it's going to be a whole different ball game of how
Yeah.
you study and how you educate yourself.
Yeah, and you won't have a career for life. You'll be of the mindset that you'll be able to have 3 or 4 different careers throughout your life, maybe in completely different skill sets, maybe codependent or related, but not necessarily. You could at age 50 decide, no, I want to be a doctor now, and you could go off and do medical school and, become a doctor and do that for another 50 years. I mean, the possibilities for humanity in longevity are, pretty incredible. It also just does change your priorities, because instead of like, I've got to work for 30, 40 years and save all this money, you now have a more measured approach, which is, if I'm going to live to 120 or 130, I have to maintain my health. Health span becomes very important. So my main job through my life is being healthy, not working, and so longevity is really going to change, the philosophy of the human species. Secondly, from a political perspective, we tend to be very short term, and company performance perspective, very short term focus. ROI, what's next year's financial results going to bring? When's the next election? We're sort of, look at the next quarter or the next year, and we are trying to make financial decisions on that basis. But in a world with extended health span and longevity, we now can start embarking on 50-year, 100-year projects, because we could live to see them. If we're today, in our 40s or 50s, there's a pretty good chance if you've got access to financial resources, you could live to 100. And so what are you going to do for the next 50 years? So now you're not you become more long-term focused in terms of the goals and projects that humanity starts to work on. It gets pretty exciting.
It sounds pretty exciting indeed. Just like I want to shift a little bit back towards the tokenization aspect. And I'm thinking, where do you see the role of the central banks and the whole tokenization economy, and with it being the whole value with the fractional ownership and everything around that? How do you see the regulators and the governments playing role in this whole new ecosystem?
I mean, it's going to be difficult for regulators, because regulators aren't the most innovative components of our economy.
And this is something going to be one of the major challenges you were just mentioning, because it's going to be a rapid growth, and regulation and licensing is going to be something to catch up. So,
well, I mean, first of all, if you're thinking about banks, the regulation around banks in the 2030s will already identify that banks are technology companies, or core technology infrastructure. And the supervisory function we have in regulation today, which is sort of monitoring that organizations in the arena are compliant with the laws that are in place, that's going to be technology based, right? So AIs will be watching what the banks do and regulating them. So this is why regulation and banking moves to core technology infrastructure.
And I think the Central Bank Innovation Hub as well, leading by our friend Paul Kairouz, they're doing a fantastic job as well.
Sure.
So
I think the UAE has a good chance out. Like, if as a futurist, there are really sort of 3 or 4 economies in the world where you want to be engaged today. China, obviously, UAE, Saudi, and probably South Korea. But as a futurist, you want economies that are, from a philosophy and psychology perspective, are embracing the future and sort of rushing towards the future. And when you start talking about government and policy setting, in most economies around the world, that's not how regulators or policymakers see themselves. They see themselves as reducing risk on current society. They're not really taking into account the risks of not adapting as yet.
Correct. And what industries do you believe, with the tokenization, that are going to be forced into being in the whole tokenization like side of it? Because there's a number of let's say like from real estate to a number of other ones. What are the something else where you see coming in and it's going to be by necessity for the tokenization side?
If you want to inject artificial intelligence systemically into an industry, it has to be tokenized. So therefore, every industry is going to need to be tokenized. You know, there's no. Now, you can talk about the way we think about commercial tokenization today is how do we tokenize real estate so we can make money out of it, for example. But that's not actually, you know, the core objective of tokenization. The, you know, like making money out of tokenization is sort of a side imperative.
Side utility, let's say. So how would you describe tokenization?
It's just machine readability. You know, it's making sure that we can measure the physical world in the digital space in real time.
All right. Yeah. I like that. That's a very, you know, to the point.
Succinct.
Yeah, I love that. I would love to know more about you and your adventures. You have like a number of really cool projects that you're working on, and something that I know that you're working on, which is fantastic. I love the fact that it's something so simple yet so vital. Tell us about your dental
Thanks for
breakthrough.
Giving it a mention.
I mean,
it.
I love that. It's such a beautiful,
Yeah.
simple concept, yet it's so needful for the coming years. And we're talking about longevity.
No,
And
it's
this
a
is
great example of how AI can really reshape accessibility. So if you look at dental care today or oral health care, 3.5 billion people have never seen a dentist. Right. And so that produces massive oral health disease issues, you know, cavities and so forth over time. So how do you change that? Well, you know, even if you increase the advertising budget of dentists by 200% globally, you're not necessarily going to get people into dental clinics. So what we've developed is a smart toothbrush, an electric toothbrush with a camera fitting. So you can scan your teeth with the camera, and we use AI to detect cavities and tell you when you need to go to the dentist or give you mitigation strategies for that in real time. So, you know, the key problem, even for you and I, you know, we've obviously used dentists. The key problem for most people like us is we go to the dentist when we've got a pain, right? Or we maybe have some cosmetic issue we want to fix. And so that means that about 70% of visits today to a dentist are when someone has a dental emergency or some dental oral health stress. But by the time you have a pain in your tooth, the damage to the tooth is already done. So we're trying to use AI detection in this smart toothbrush to detect the start of that damage and get that mitigated early on. And so we can detect a cavity with 93% accuracy today on the toothbrush, and then we can send you directly to a dentist to get it addressed. You know, so it's and it's very cheap tech. You know, like the toothbrushes we're using. You know, the production cost is about $30 US, including shipping, and you know we're going to have a subscription style service like Whoop. You know, with the AI diagnostic in there. So it's a good high margin business, but it really opens up accessibility of dental care to a much broader audience. 10% of our toothbrushes are going to go to NGOs and charities for the purpose of helping people in, you know, where they don't have access to dental care today.
I love that. And I love that the key is prevention, which is the hardest.
Correct.
And somewhere where all of us lack.
Yeah.
And you said 10% is going to a lot of people who don't have access to this, not even technology, because we don't even have access to this now.
Sure.
And the beauty of it, you were saying you just check it, let's say once a month.
Correct.
And then you just figure out what's going on with your...
Yeah, unless you chip a tooth or something like that, or you have an injury, the reality is the condition of your teeth changes quite slowly. So once a month is generally enough to have a sort of baseline detection on the AI. But this is as good as you going into a dental clinic today, sitting on a chair under the lights, and a dentist looking in your mouth with the mirror and checking your teeth. You know, we'll have the same level of accuracy in terms of detecting cavities. Yeah. You know, available to you at home, just using a smart brush and an app.
And I love that. I mean, these kind of initiatives are the reason why longevity and the reason why we're going to live longer.
Yeah.
So
and it's cheaper than two visits to a dentist in a year. You know,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. Brett, tell us something about you. How do you spend your time on a normal day? How do you want to spend your time? What gets you excited besides the future, of course?
The future gets me excited.
Yeah.
So I'm running 6 or 7 businesses right now. I'm very entrepreneurial. I'm doing at least 2 or 3 podcast recordings a week, either in the hosting chair on the other side, like today. I travel the world. I do 25 countries a year as a speaker. I'm writing and publishing. So my new book, Branch Tomorrow, comes out in September, which is a book on the decline of branch banking because of digital access to banking. And at the same time, I'm working on sort of next generation futurist concepts like the Futurist Summit and the Futurist Network. Actually, another tech that we've built, which you've seen sort of preliminary of, is we've actually built a futurist super forecasting engine. So we've taken all of this, all of the knowledge of the world's top 300 futurists and ingested that into this engine, so we can, you can apply that insight that those 300 futurists bring to the world and apply that to planning for your own business or government and so forth.
This LLM is very interesting because we were speaking about this earlier, and I mean, tell me a little bit more, because you were telling me, and it's just something that we just passed through, but it's something extraordinary. And talking about the LLMs, we were talking about the narrow LLM as well yesterday, right? So
when you look at these massive scale LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, Opus, etc., Perplexity. These engines are built up massive models to try and get close to general artificial intelligence, or AGI, as fast as possible, with the objective of having an all-purpose sort of cognitive equivalent of a human as a query engine. And as people like Eric Schmidt, ex-Google chairman, say, within a year, the smartest scientists, the smartest physicists, the smartest doctors in the world will be AI, right? That's from applying to those sorts of fields. However, that is not just AGI. These specialist engines that we're building, protein folding, what DeepMind did, and so forth. These are highly specialized models. So we've built a highly specialized model in future forecasting, built off the collective knowledge of all these futurists. And you can apply that and see essentially the different timelines that are possible with the emerging technologies and emerging sort of thinking, and sort of model that out. So conservative timeline, a more consensus-based timeline, and then a more aggressive breakthrough technology timelines. And you can measure that. You can see the interdependencies. You can see public policy requirements, technological innovation requirements, investment requirements. It's a really unique sort of engine. So yeah, I do a ton of stuff in these emerging tech and emerging spheres of influence. For me personally, I try and work out every day or two, depending on my travel schedule. But I'm enjoying more of sort of life experientially. So I travel to 25, 30 countries a year as a speaker. I try and spend some time and spend time in those economies, and I work remotely most of the time. Obviously have in-person meetings with clients and teams and so forth, but I've built my life around pursuing stuff that I think really matters to the future of humanity, and trying to be as healthy as possible.
what do you think matters the most in the future of humanity?
I think the real question that emerges with AI, and particularly AI consciousness, is what does it mean to be human? And I think that is about to take a big shift. Right? Because today, what I would say is what's the purpose of most humans? And it's surviving or building up enough assets that they can live their best life. But the technology is going to enable us to live our best lives, not money in the way we've thought of it historically. And so philosophically is, how do you project the human species to be the best that we can be as a collective species? And the biggest change there is that competition for resources is an anathema to the survival of the species. The more competition we have, actually, the less efficient the human species will evolve. So that's a step change in philosophy about what it means to be human.
Brett, life as we know it is going to change.
Absolutely.
What do you advise someone watching this podcast, someone who's busy with their day-to-day life, where a lot of people are not as familiar or as educated on the AI aspect, and it's changing and moving drastically? What do you recommend?
There are two types of people in the world today. Those that are using AI to sort of rethink their career or, think about their business, and sort of see where it's going to take them. And the second type of person is those that are going to be replaced by the first type.
Correct.
So that's what I would say is the most urgent issue. Secondly, dream bigger. I don't know if you ever watched Inception, but don't be afraid to dream bigger, darling. And that's really, I think, the key element here is that we are on the cusp of amazing technological and scientific breakthroughs that are going to enable us to do incredibly meaningful and unthought of things in today's perspective of science and technology. So don't be afraid to think about the biggest problems, the biggest challenges humanity is facing, because we will soon have the tools to solve those.
I love that. Where do you get your news from?
So I watch a lot of sort of next gen, science type podcasts and stuff on YouTube and listen to emerging tech stuff. I curate, obviously, through social media, the leading thinkers in this respect. But for me personally, running the Futurist podcast is where I get
Daily
the
educate
deepest
yourself, right?
knowledge, because I'm getting one of the world's experts in these fields coming into the studio and talking with us on this stuff, and I get to learn. So for me, the Futurist podcast has become this sort of circular, reinforcing learning capability as well.
I love that. That is fantastic. And the fact that you're learning every day through people, this is something that, we tend to do more. And you're very lucky and you're fortunate because you create with the podcast and with the Futurist, the amount of beautiful guests that you've had. I think you've had Elon Musk, and you've also had someone very specific, Sophia the robot.
Yes. No, we've
Tell
had
us
some
about,
amazing guests.
Elon Musk is cool, but tell us about Sophia the robot.
So actually, we had Sophia on. We interviewed Sophia and David Hansen from Hansen Robotics, who did Sophia the robot, built her. We had David Hansen on. But the chief cognitive scientist, or the chief scientist for Hansen Robotics at the time, who built Sophia, was a guy called Ben Goertzel. So I've had Ben on 3 times on my podcasts, first on Breaking Banks and a couple of times on the Futurists. And Ben, it's really interesting to understand how he thought about building Sophia in terms of her consciousness. Most of, it's different today, but when I interviewed Sophia, it was fairly scripted in terms of the interview. But today, of course, we could have an interview with ChatGPT live now and have it in a conversational manner. It would be much more competent.
Advanced.
So, I think there's that. But, next generation robotics teams, we've had Beyond Imagination, Dr. Harry Kluwer, and he was the first to develop teleoperated robots. So robots that could work on the moon, for example, which you could run in a VR headset, and things like that. So humans don't have to do that work. But of course, now we're doing more autonomous robots, as the capabilities coming for that. So, yeah, the robotics stuff is pretty cool.
It sounds very cool as well. It reminded me like how we've met, me and you, is through our common friend Ken Rudrowski.
Shout out to Ken.
Exactly. Shout out to Ken. He's amazing. He's a really good friend of us. And also for me, he's a mentor as well. Hopefully your partner too. And with Ken, we've talked a lot, but I'm just thinking something about you. what would be a moment that fundamentally kind of changed your trajectory within your whole path? Because you've shifted.
Yeah. Look, I think probably the thing that really impacted me the most, and this is quite a personal thing, but my mum died at a young age. She was 49 when she died. She died of an autoimmune disease. All four of, so my mum's three brothers all died young, because of autoimmune, and her parents died quite young. My grandfather was 65, I think, and my grandmother younger than that. She was in her 50s, and as a result, that being at the age of 8 or 9 and having family members drop off because of this genetic condition meant that I assumed that I was, my life was going to be taken prematurely by this issue. So I worked a lot harder to try and establish myself and get the resources that I would need to manage my health in the future and look after my family and so forth. The driver for that was a big key driver for myself. So that was foundational. But I think also just that I was fortunate to grow up in a time where technology, computers were becoming more accessible, and the accessibility of computing and having sort of a natural capability for that was also very key in terms of the way my career developed.
Love that. Brad, one last question. What is one practical advice that you can tell people for them to focus on for this next coming, not even decade, the next few months to a year or two, considering how the technology is rapidly advancing? Where do you see everything going? And one practical advice for people to get ready and to be resilient for what's coming next?
I think the key element is having mental agility. So be open to new ideas, be open to challenging the way you've thought about the world. These are the people who are going to go through this period of massive change in society and technological change with the least stress. One of the biggest growth areas in the world will be human counseling services to cope with so many people being displaced by technology and the rules changing, right? Because people would be, but I thought I was going to do this for the rest of my life and now it's been taken away from me. What do I do? How do I define myself? So the ability to adapt in that environment, having the mental agility to not be married to how you were raised, for example, or how you perceive the world, that's going to be a key skill set.
That's so true. That's so enlightening because, it's something that I was actually recently trying to figure out as well. The fact that AI is going to replace more blue-collar jobs as well. So, where do you see that?
AI isn't going to care about whether they're blue collar or white collar or whatever. It's lawyers, doctors,
right?
accountants, everything.
How do you see them adapting? It's crazy. Do we not study to be a doctor or a lawyer?
Yeah. You will still
do we shift?
You will study, but let's put it this way. The next 5 years, it's going to be man plus machine. That's your competitive advantage. A doctor using AI to diagnose your condition. And already AI diagnostics are proving to be better than most GP doctors, correct, right? And it will be soon where AI is better than every doctor in diagnosing. So as a doctor, you'll sit side by side with AI to do the diagnostics and do a treatment plan and so forth, generating personalized medicine and all of that, and gene therapy will come as well. And so as a doctor, you really have that binary choice: is you either use AI or you become in a smaller and smaller group of doctors who are trying to survive by doing things the traditional way. But think of it, in 5 years, if you go to a doctor and you come home to your family and the doctor told you need these pills, your family's going to say, did the doctor use AI? And if you said, I don't think so, then your family's going to be, you've got to go see another doctor, right? Because we're not going to trust a doctor on his own without AI. So that produces a really interesting scenario. After about 5-7 years of us being used to the fact that the best doctors use AI because AI diagnostics is the best, then in the future we say, well, we don't need a doctor to diagnose anymore. The AI can do that. It's only at times when the AI tells us we need to see a doctor that we'll see a doctor. So that'll be the shift in the 2030s.
Beautiful. Brett King, welcome to the Block Talks. Thank you for being here. Great having you. And I will see you again very soon.
We'll see you in the future.
For the Futurist Summit, and I'll see you in the future. That's the way to go. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Cheers.